Welcome to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. So Saturday, May 6th, King Charles III was coronated in England, in Britain. And there have been growing calls for reparations coming from 12 countries that were conquered, or countries that were part of the Commonwealth. Many of these are Caribbean nations. Now, you remember back when Queen Elizabeth II passed away, and she died in September 2022. Okay, I think that was September 8th, 2022. You remember we talked about the legacy of Great Britain and when it came to slavery and colonization, and how 100 years ago, one fifth of the world's population lived under British rule. Okay, 1/5 of the world's population lived under British rule about 100 years ago, at a time when you had 700,000 people under British rule and 2.5 billion people in the world. All right, so there have been a number of articles written dealing with how different nations, Caribbean nations, Jamaica, Antigua, Barbuda, Australia, a number of nations are calling for reparations and calling for an official apology for slavery. Okay, so we're going to talk about that on today's show, and I'm going to let you hear once again the segment from Roland Martin Unfiltered that we did on September 9th, 2022, when we talked about, in that segment, we talked about Jeff Bezos, and we talked about the professor originally from Nigeria, Uja Anya, and I gave some history on Queen Elizabeth II and the British colonization. Okay, that video has been viewed over 300,000 times, and you can watch that on Roland's YouTube channel and his YouTube channel, Roland Martin. All right, now, also in the news, we have Proud Boys who were found guilty in federal court. This was this past week. Enrique Tarrio, the former chairman of the Proud Boys, and 3 others were found guilty of January 6th seditious conspiracy. January 6th seditious conspiracy. Now, we talked about this when I was on Faraji Muhammad's show, The Culture, on Thursday, May 4th. And I'm going to let you hear an excerpt of that conversation as well. And more people are talking about is Trump next, or are charges against Trump imminent? And if you've been paying attention to Special Counsel Jack Smith, and his investigation is continuing to ramp up, and I think charges are coming soon for Donald Trump, but also they're going to come faster from Fonnie Willis in Georgia than they're going to come from Jack Smith in with the federal investigation. Okay, so we'll discuss that also. Now, at the top of our second hour, I'm going to get into a conversation that I've been trying to get to the past couple of weeks, and we ran out of time. And April 11th, when I was on Faraji Muhammad's show, The Culture, we discussed spanking children, African-American children, is a holdover from slavery. Spanking children is a holdover from slavery and was not traditionally practiced in West Africa. All right. So I'm going to let you hear that conversation, and we're going to discuss that some also. Now, I know a lot of people will say, well, I'm from the South, and, that's what we did, things like this. Well, the reason why they did that in the South is because prior to 1910, 90% of African Americans lived in the South, and as a result of slavery. And during slavery, we were beaten by the slave master and overseers, etc. That's a carryover from slavery. Historically, generally speaking, African people did not beat their children. Okay, that's something that we picked up here. So we'll discuss that as well. Also, an additional development in the California Reparations Task Force, California Reparations Task Force. So we've been talking about that here on this show. You've seen articles I posted. I've been communicating with Camila Moore, who is the attorney, who's the chairwoman of the California Reparations Task Force. I submitted this story to Faraji Muhammad for us to discuss when I was on his show on Thursday. Black Californians could receive up to $1.2 million in reparations payments for qualifying African-American Californians, okay? And this measure was approved by the California Reparations Task Force. Now, it has to be approved by the state assembly, okay? We're going to discuss that. And also, I want you to see what Fox News is saying about this as well, and the article that Fox News had, because the article that Fox News had is very deceiving and is designed to enrage their viewership, which is largely older white males who are non-college educated, okay? And I mean, you know, some of the same ones that stormed the U.S. Capitol building January 6, 2021, the same ones that watched the white supremacist Tucker Carlson, okay? Not all white people who watch Fox News are white supremacists, but most white supremacists who have cable watch Fox News. So we'll discuss that also. The state of California is one step closer to paying reparations to African-American residents whose ancestry goes back to the not just the American slave trade, but it's dealing with also after slavery as well, because once again, California comes into the Union as a free state in 1850 because of the Compromise of 1850. There have been identified approximately 1,500 African Americans that were in a semi-slavery state, but that's basically from 1850 to 1865, 15 years, okay? The repairing of the damage that they're largely dealing with, and that is explained in the 500-page report, is not because of that 15 years. It's what happened after that 15 years. I've read the 28-page executive summary of the 500-page report. I'm now reading the 500-page report. Everybody should read the California Reparations Task Force. Okay, so we'll discuss this and more on today's show. Now, on the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world, because right now it's correct your own behavior. What you do for yourself, what you do to yourself, and what you allow other people to do to you and get away with is based upon what you think about yourself. What you think about yourself is based upon what you have been taught about yourself. What you've been taught about yourself is based upon everything you've read, heard, and seen about yourself. So when you control the radius of a man or woman's thoughts, you can control the circumference of his or her actions, because the mind can't do or teach what it doesn't know. Now, we deal with a number of different topics here on the African History Network show. We deal with current events in history, politics, education, economic empowerment, entrepreneurship, relationships, love, sex, health issues, and much, much more. Visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. You can register for the online history classes that I teach on Saturdays and Sundays, and we did free class sessions this weekend for those also. So visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, to register for those. All right, so I want to jump into this article here before we go to break. There was a good article from Newsweek.com, dealing with the growing calls for reparations from Great Britain. Okay, now it's important to note that the King, as well as the Queen of England, does not get involved in politics. They don't have an authority to Parliament takes care of politics, okay, based upon the institution there that they have in Britain. The king does not get involved, as well as the queen does not get involved in political issues. They don't get involved in passing legislation. They can't pass legislation or things of this nature. All right. But when Queen Elizabeth II died, the monarchy was valued, the net worth of the monarchy was valued at $28 billion, and her personal net worth was valued at $500 million. Okay. I think she could have written a check to somebody. So I'm just saying. King Charles III faces calls for slavery reparations from 12 countries. This is from May 4th, 2023, from Newsweek.com. There's articles from the Associated Press on this as well, and CBS News. Now, King Charles III should use his coronation to give a formal apology, for the horrific impacts of slavery and colonialism, and commence, quote, a process of reparatory justice, according to campaigners in 12 countries where he is king. Now, world leaders and royal family members will gather at Westminster Abbey Saturday, May 6th, to watch King Charles and Queen Camilla be crowned. Okay. I ain't watching none of that. I don't care about it. I saw when I got up, it had already happened. They were still talking about it on MSNBC. I saw some of the post coronation analysis. I watched a little bit of that. I could care less about him being coronated. All right. However, not everyone will be celebrating the monarchy, which for some remains a symbol of Britain's imperial past. We'll deal with this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM, the Superstation, the Future Radio. All right, the calling number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. All right, so right before the break, I was talking about some articles that I was looking at this weekend. And there's one from the Newsweek magazine, Newsweek.com. And I posted this article on our Facebook fan page, The African History Network, The African History Network. And it deals with how you have 12 countries that are under the rulership of Britain, where King Charles is head of state of these. They're part of the Commonwealth. And they have put forth a letter demanding reparations from Britain, as well as demanding a formal apology for slavery. The name of this article, if we go back to this here, the name of this article is King Charles III. King Charles III faces calls for slavery reparations from 12 countries. King Charles III faces calls for slavery reparations from 12 countries. This is written by Jack Royston from May 4th, 2023 for Newsweek.com. So the article goes on to say, however, not everyone will be celebrating the monarchy. However, not everyone will be celebrating the monarchy, which for some remains a symbol of Britain's imperial past. First Nations, indigenous peoples, and advocacy groups in 12 countries where Charles is king released a joint statement this past Wednesday, May 3rd, which was also sent to King Charles himself. Now, an excerpt from the statement says, quote, "We, the undersigned, call on the British monarch, King Charles III, on the date of his coronation, being May 6, 2023, to acknowledge the horrific impacts on and legacy of genocide and colonization of the indigenous and enslaved peoples of Antigua and Barbuda, New Zealand, right here, New Zealand, Australia, the Bahamas, Belize, Canada. We're here in Detroit. Those are our neighbors. Canada, Grenada, Jamaica. Now, everybody talks about, come back to Jamaica again and again. I don't really know know if people really understand that Jamaica was conquered by Christopher Columbus in 1494, conquered by the Spanish. Papua New Guinea, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, and St. Vincent and the Grenadines. A lot of these places where we like to go vacation were colonized, and oftentimes by multiple colonizers. So the Jamaica, for instance, first colonized by the Spanish under the master of genocide, Christopher Columbus, and then the British are going to take over Jamaica. You have Haiti. Haiti was conquered by Columbus in 1492 because Haiti is the western third of the island of what Columbus called La Isla Española, the Spanish island, which was anglicized to Hispaniola. And in 1697, the French take over the western third of the island of Hispaniola from the Spanish in 1697, and it was known as the Treaty of Ridgewick, and they call that colony Saint Dominique. The Spanish called it Santo Domingo. Then in 1791, there's a revolution in the colony of Saint Dominique, and in January 1st, 1804, those Africans declare their independence and called that colony Haiti or Haiti. This is the Haitian Revolution. Well, they were conquered by Christopher Columbus on behalf of the Spanish crown in 1492. Okay, so a lot of these places where we like to go vacation have never recovered from the treachery imposed upon them by the Spanish, the French, the British. These countries were conquered over 500 years ago by Columbus. They have never recovered from this. We have to understand Puerto Rico, conquered by Columbus. Panama, Honduras, they've never recovered from what has happened to them. Quote, our collective indigenous rights organizations, among other organizations who are working to help our communities recover from centuries of racism, oppression, colonialism, and slavery, now rightly recognized by the United Nations as, quote, crimes against humanity, also call for a formal apology and for a process of reparatory justice to commence, repairing the damage. So I know we like to go to Jamaica and get our groove back like Stella, but you gotta, understand the history of what's taking place. Now, my same sentiments for Queen Elizabeth II when she died are basically the same for King Charles and Queen Camilla. Basically the same thing. They're colonizers. Let's call it what it is. Okay. Now, May 19th, 2018, when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry, I did a broadcast, and it's on YouTube. You can go watch it. And I said, Black people watch the royal wedding and got teary-eyed, but forgot about the history of the transatlantic slave trade. They forgot the British involvement in the transatlantic slave trade. So the opulence in all the pomp and circumstance that you saw displayed on Saturday a lot of that was because of the exploitation of African people and the murder of African people being worked to death. So this is why I don't sit up and get entertained by these colonizers. Now, it is true that King Charles mentioned previously, I don't know about on Saturday, but previously it is true. He mentioned the atrocities of the slave trade and things like this. It is true that he does support researching the British involvement and the monarchy's involvement in the slave trade. Okay. So there are a couple of articles that dealt with this. So there's one from the Associated Press that came out April 6, 2023, that talks about this. Okay, now we have to understand Britain was involved in slavery for 272 years. They were involved in slavery for 272 years, and the British kept excellent records. So I really don't know what the hell you got to research. I'm just going to be honest with you. Okay, the BBC has excellent records on this. I use some of their stuff in my classes. Okay, I don't know what it is that you still have to research, but then, okay, that's what you want to do. Okay, whatever. So let's look at this article right here. Associated Press, April 6, 2023. King Charles III supports probe into monarchy slave ties. King Charles III supports probe into monarchy slave ties. Okay, it's in this article. It talks about how King Charles III, for the first time, has signaled support for research into the British monarchy's ties to slavery after a document showed an ancestor with shares, S-H-A-R-E-S, shares in a slave trading company, a Buckingham Palace spokesperson said on Thursday. So this came out April 6, 2023. Okay, this was exposed in an article from The Guardian. All right. Now, Charles has taken the issue, quote, profoundly serious, and academics will be given access to the royal collection and archives, the palace said. Now, the statement was in response to an article in The Guardian, which is a United Kingdom publication, theguardian.com, the Guardian newspaper, that revealed a document showing that the deputy governor of the slave trading Royal African Company transferred so this was a slave trading company, the Royal African Company, transferred 1,000 pounds of shares in the business to King William III in 1689. Now, the newspaper reported on the document as part of a series of stories on royal wealth and finances, as well as the monarchy's connection to slavery. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. You listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation, the future of radio, talking about the history of colonizers. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. We'll be back in a few minutes. Hey, if you like this type of information, you can support the African History Network, help us keep broadcasting, stay on the air, keep doing the research. $, the AHN show through Cash App, $, the AHN show through Cash App, and through PayPal, paypal.me/the AHN show. Okay. And we have the information on the homepage of our website. Stand by. This helps us keep doing the research, stay on the air, keep broadcasting, pay some of the bills, etc.
Great programming is what you want. 910 AM is what you need.
I'm your host, Brother Michael in Hotel. On the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. A lot of these people don't know what the hell they're talking about. They may have their areas of expertise, but some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. We have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this.
Catch it all right here on 910 AM Superstation. The views and opinions expressed on any program are those of the producer or the persons appearing on the program, and do not necessarily reflect the views and opinions of 910 AM Superstation or Adele Media.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 a.m. the Superstation, Future Radio. All right. So right before the break, we were talking about growing calls from 12 countries that are part of the Commonwealth, or countries that have King Charles III as head of state, growing calls for a formal apology for slavery as well as reparations. Now, when I refer to the royal family as colonizers, I'm not calling them colonizers because they're white. I'm calling them colonizers because 100 years ago, 1/5 of the world population lived under British rule. They were colonized, and you had 700 million people who lived under British rule at a time when you had 2.5 billion people on Earth. So I'm calling them colonizers because that's what they did. So I just want to make it clear. It's not a racial statement. It's a historical statement. 313-778-7600 is the calling number if you have a question or comment. So I want to go back to this article here briefly. Then we're going to go to clip number 1, Doug. And I want you to hear the conversation from September 9th, 2022 on Roland Martin Unfiltered, when I dealt with some of the history of Queen Elizabeth II and the Great Britain and their legacy of slavery. If we go back to this piece here from the Associated Press, the news. So this is dealing with the report that came from theguardian.com in 2023 that showed that one of Prince Charles's ancestors was involved in the slave trade and involved with the Royal African Company, which was a slave trading company. The statement was in response to an article in the Guardian newspaper that revealed a document showing that the deputy governor of the slave trading company, of the slave trading Royal African Company, transferred 1,000 pounds of shares in the business to King William III in 1689. The newspaper reported on the document as part of a series of stories on royal wealth and finances, as well as the monarchy's connection to slavery, as well as the British monarchy's connection to slavery. Okay, now King Charles III ascended to the throne last year after the death of his mother, Queen Elizabeth II. His coronation, we know, took place May 6th. The king has said he's trying to deepen his understanding of slavery's enduring impact that runs deep in the Commonwealth, an international grouping of countries made up mostly of former British colonies. Okay, deep. So now this, I know King Charles is busy. You know, you trying to deal with people that don't want you to be king, and I know he's busy, but he's in his 70s. He's trying to deepen his understanding of slavery's enduring impact. Why don't you go to Jamaica and talk to those Africans there and let them educate you on slavery's enduring impact? Why don't you go to Barbados and talk to those Africans there? I know Barbados broke away from the Commonwealth. Why don't you go to these nations? Why don't you go to Nigeria? That was a colony of Great Britain. Why don't you go? So he's in his 70s. He's trying to deepen his understanding. I don't understand that. I'm sorry. I just don't. During a ceremony that marked Barbados becoming a republic 2 years ago, Charles, who was Prince Charles then, referred to, quote, the darkest days of our past and the appalling atrocity of slavery, which forever stains our history, end quote. English settlers used African slaves to turn the island of Barbados into a wealthy sugar colony, like they did a lot of other places. Sugar was king. Okay, so they did that in a lot of other places, like Jamaica. Okay, same thing the French did in Haiti. Now, Saint Dominique. Now, the research into the monarchy's ties to slavery is co-sponsored by Historic Royal Places and Manchester University, and is expected to be completed by 2026. Expected to be completed by 2026. Okay, it's going to take them 2 years. Okay, all right. Check. Slavery ended in Britain in 1833. 1833. It ended in Britain in 1833. They were involved in slavery for 272 years. It ended in 1833, but it's going to take you 2 years to do research. Okay. All right. So read the rest of this article here. So he does support research. Now, I don't know what else he supports, but he does support research. You have the one from, so we talked about the one from Newsweek, and there's a growing call for reparations. These 12 countries, there's a growing call for reparations and a formal apology. Now, if we go back to the one from Newsweek, newsweek.com, name of this article is King Charles III faces calls for slavery reparations from 12 countries. This is from May 4th, 2023. All right. If we go back here, and this is on page, I think this is page 3 where I want to go. We're going to clip 1 in just a minute, Doug. Okay, right here. Beyond an apology and reparations, the campaigners want the, quote, return of all cultural treasures and artifacts stolen from our peoples throughout the hundreds of years of genocide, enslavement, discrimination, massacre, and racial discrimination by the authorities empowered by the protection of the British Crown, end quote. And, quote, the repatriation of all remains of our collective peoples that reside in UK museums and institutions and that represent our family histories, genealogies, cultural history, and spiritual ancestry. They want it all back. Okay, now that's what I want to hear about. I don't want to hear about some colonizer being coronated. I'm sorry. I don't want to hear about that. This is what they want: the artwork back. They want everything that was stolen from them back, all the physical artifacts that are in British museums, and they charge admission to see what they stole. They want all that. These Caribbean nations and indigenous nations, they want all of that back. Okay, they want to repair the damage, and they want a formal apology, but not just an apology, not just saying I'm sorry, let's be friends. They want you to acknowledge what you did. Okay, not King Charles himself, but the British monarchy and Great Britain. They want an acknowledgement of what happened. Now, on September 9th, 2022, I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered, and we talked about the death. This is the day after Queen Elizabeth died, and we talked about that, and we talked about Uju Anya, Professor Uju Anya, and Jeff Bezos going after her, all that stuff. Okay, let's go to this clip, please, Doug.
Now, the Professor Uju Anya, she didn't back down. Now, Twitter did delete that particular tweet from her, saying that it violated their standards. Not sure how that's the case. But when you begin to look at her Twitter feed, boom, she said, if anyone expects me to express anything but disdain for the monarch who supervised a government that sponsored the genocide that massacred and displaced half my family and the consequences of which those alive today are still trying to overcome, you can keep wishing upon a star. Yeah, I don't think she's going to be backing down from any of that. There was some other, I'm looking at some other tweets that she had posted. Again, she had, all kind of different tweets. She did respond to Jeff Bezos. She said, "May everyone you and your merciless greed have harmed in this world. Remember you as fondly as I remember my colonizers." Wow. Again, her tweet to spur the reaction. Carnegie Mellon did offer a response. This was what they posted. They said, "We do not condone the offensive and objectionable messages posted by Yuju Anya today on her personal social media account. Free expression is core to the mission of higher education. However, the views she shared absolutely do not represent the values of the institution, nor the standards of discourse we seek to foster." So here's what's interesting. And this was a tweet here that Yuju retweeted. "Reminder that Queen Elizabeth is not a remnant of colonial times. She was an active participant in colonialism. She actively tried to stop independence movements, and she tried to keep newly independent colonies from leaving the Commonwealth. The evil she did was enough." She was talking about this article here. This woman was, it says she was tortured with axes during Kenya's struggle for independence from British colonial rule. As Britain celebrates the platinum jubilee of its monarch, this old fighter wants to send her a message: "Let Elizabeth bring what belongs to me."
Okay, pause it right there. We'll continue this on the other side of the break. Listen to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number. We'll be back in a few minutes. All right, so we have here. We've got Lila Starr. We have Sonia. Okay, Sonia said, yes, that's the only thing I want to hear is reparations. We've got Kenya Russell.
It's what you need. I'm your host, Brother Michael in Hotel. On the African History Network show, we focus on educating, empowering, and inspiring people of African descent throughout the diaspora and around the world. A lot of people don't know what the hell they're talking about. They may have their areas of expertise, but some people need to learn how to stay in their own lane. If you don't know, just say you don't know. We have a lot to talk about, so we're going to jump right into this.
Catch it all right here on 910 AM Superstation.
Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Be sure to visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and check out we did 2 free class sessions this weekend of my 12-week online course, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. Okay, so we deal with thousands of years of history and what leads up to the transatlantic slave trade taking place. When you scroll down the website, it has information about our radio show right here on 910 AM WFDF, our PayPal and Cash App information. We have the 12-week online course here. So you can click right here, register now, free class session. And then you can also register for the full 12-week online course. This time around, we're going to do 13 or 14 weeks of the class. It's on sale $60, regularly $130. And then our second class, the one I teach on Sundays, the one I did today, Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. We did a free class session today as well. This course is discounted to $40, regularly $130. Even after the course is over with, you can go back and watch the entire class, okay? We have a bundle pack for $80, but 2 years from now, a year from now, 2 years from now, you can still watch the entire course. So your access does not expire. All right, I want to go back to the story here dealing with King Charles III and the British monarchy. And I want to go back to this clip from September 9th, 2022, when I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered, okay? And we dealt with the passing of Queen Elizabeth. She died the day before. Before we go back to that clip, just quickly, I want to show you this from Wikipedia. And this is a map from Wikipedia. This is a map of the list of countries that gained independence from the United Kingdom. Okay. A list of countries that gained independence from the United Kingdom. It's one thing to just look at a piece of paper and see the names of these nations. Okay. It's something like 120 nations, going back to probably 1931 that gained independence, starting with Canada. Well, United States, 1776, we know that. But Canada, 1931. When you look at the map of the world and you see all these nations that were under the control of Great Britain, then all of this starts to really sink in. Okay. And then you look at Africa, they got so many colonies in Africa largely because of the Berlin Conference of 1884 and 1885. South Africa gained their independence in 1931. Lesotho, 1966, and Lesotho was an enclave inside of South Africa, like Highland Park, Michigan is an enclave inside of Detroit. Botswana, Swaziland, Zimbabwe, Malawi, Tanzania, Zambia, Nigeria, Ghana, Sierra Leone, Uganda, Egypt in 1922, Sudan, Gambia. Then we look at Israel, Qatar, Bahrain, Kuwait, Iraq, Jordan, Pakistan, India, Papua New Guinea, Malaysia. Okay, you look at all that. Australia, 1942, New Zealand, 1947. Then we look at Guyana, St. Vincent and the Grenadines, Trinidad and Tobago, Barbados, Grenada, Dominica, the Bahamas, Jamaica, Belize, Antigua and Barbuda, St. Kitts and Nevis, St. Lucia, Canada, okay, Ireland, Malta. So when you look at a map of the world and you look at all this, you say, I'll be damn. Okay. No wonder all these people are upset. Kenya, I forgot Kenya. Kenya, 1963. Can't forget Kenya. Facing Mount Kenya, Jomo Kenyatta. Kenya. All right. So, yeah. So you can say you interested in learning more and you're in your 70s. Are you interested in learning more about the history? Come on, man. Okay. Let's go back to this clip here. We're going to start at the 5-minute mark. Let's go back to the segment, please. All right, we'll continue this on the other side of the break. You're going to hear my response. That video has been viewed over 300,000 times. That's on Roland Martin's YouTube channel. And we shared it here on our show also. This is the African History Network. I'm Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right, we're going to go right back to this clip from Roland Martin Unfiltered. From September 9th, 2022. I was on the show. This was the day after Queen Elizabeth II passed away. And I was breaking down some of the history of the British monarchy and slavery and colonialism. Let's go back to this clip, please, Doug.
Let's go to our panel here. I find it's very interesting when I said this last night, Michael, it's very interesting when people, they have this view that when someone passes, you in the first 24, 48 hours, first week, you can't say anything bad about them. You hear the phrase, you can't say anything good about somebody, don't say anything at all. I saw a video, Dale Hughley, he said that people should have compassion when someone dies. But I saw these pieces, I saw this back and forth and these tweets from Uju Anya, and she talked about how her family was devastated, how they were massacred. And in fact, there was an interview that she gave, and she said this to the person in the interview. She said, I am the child and sibling of survivors of genocide. From 1967 to 1970, more than 3 million civilians were massacred when the Igbo people of Nigeria tried to form the independent country. And I said this, and I think it's important for us to say it. So people are angry that individuals who dealt with genocide because of British colonial rule are not celebrating her life the way they want them to. Yet again, people gladly condemned Fidel Castro. And so this goes to what I always talk about. The person that controls the narrative controls how we think and feel. And frankly, the view in this country is don't say anything bad about Queen Elizabeth II because she was a great, wonderful, happy person, and ignore colonial rule and its impact on indigenous people.
Well, you know, Roland, this is one of the reasons why the Black Star Media Network is so important. And last night I did a 3-hour broadcast dealing with Queen Elizabeth II, British colonialism and slavery, because I watched a lot of the coverage all day long on MSNBC. That's basically what I had it on all day, watching MSNBC, and they didn't deal with any of that history. Okay, the opulence, when they showed all the footage and going back decades, and they showed the gold carriage, drawn by 30 horses, and they show all the people in their regalia and things like this. They don't talk about the British colonialism that exploited people, tortured people, enslaved people to create the billions of dollars. So you see that opulence displayed, you know. So when you know now within the last maybe 3 hours, New York Times just published an article. In Africa, the Queen's death renews a debate about the legacy of the British Empire, and it deals with Kenya and the Mau Mau Rebellion. Okay, when you go, I did a lot of research yesterday on Queen Elizabeth, but also on Great Britain. When you look at how many African countries they got from the Berlin Conference of 1884, okay, and you look, they got the Gambia, Nigeria, where that sister's from, okay, they got Ghana, Sierra Leone, they got Kenya, Tanzania, Malawi, Zambia, Zimbabwe, South Africa, okay. When you go talk to those African people who have relatives who were killed by the British Empire, they have no love for her. They have no love for King Charles III. But May 19th, 2022, when Meghan Markle married Prince Harry, I did a 2-hour broadcast, and I said, Black people watched the royal wedding and got teary-eyed, but you forgot about the transatlantic slave trade. Because I said she married into, this is no disrespect to Meghan Markle, I said she married into a family of colonizers. They're not colonizers because they're white. They're colonizers because Britain colonized 1/5 of the world population 100 years ago. 1/5 of the world population was under British rule. And they didn't rule with kindness. They didn't rule with a smile. They ruled with brutality. So I don't wish anything ill on Queen Elizabeth II. I sure as hell don't miss her. And I hope some more join her. Seriously. Go study the history of the British Royal Empire and how they got what they got. These are some demons. These are colonizers. I understand. I may have expressed it differently than Uja Anya, but I totally understand what she's saying, because those were her relatives who were massacred by these white supremacists, by these colonizers, who then want to put a handshake and a smile. They won't even have a conversation about reparations with Jamaica. Jamaica's about to sue them for reparations. They won't even have a conversation about reparations. So I have no love lost for them.
Here are some, Eton Thomas, former NBA player, Kelly, he posted a couple of videos on his Twitter feed. I thought, might as well play both of them. Just want to give folks a look at this. So check this out.
In 2022, Her Majesty Queen Elizabeth II became the first British monarch to celebrate a Platinum Jubilee. The celebrations took place over a 4-day bank holiday. Millions of Brits partook in street parties, and people around the world joined in on the celebrations. But is celebrating the British monarch harmless fun, or does it normalize the monarchy's long history of colonialism? And is it a celebration of British imperialism? Here are 4 ways in which the British royal family has benefited from colonialism. They have historically benefited from the enslavement of human beings. In 1562, John Hawkins was the first Englishman to include African people in his cargo. He traded these people for ginger and sugar. On his next voyage in 1564, Queen Elizabeth I funded a vessel for his journey. The British East India Company was formed in 1600 to exploit trade with Southeast Asia. They did that by colonizing land and exploiting people through the transatlantic slave trade. The figure who signed the Royal Charter allowing this all to happen was also Elizabeth I. Between 1690 and 1807, an estimated 6 million Africans were transported from Africa to the Americas on British or Anglo-American ships. The royal family and the British Parliament protected the trade. After Elizabeth I's death, the Royal African Company was established in 1660 by the Duke of York. The company transported more than 187,000 slaves who were often branded DY for the Duke of York. It's difficult to say how much the royals benefited from slavery, but many say it funded the entire British treasury. And it's safe to say that much of the monarch's significance, power, and wealth stems from the enslavement of Africans. Lucy Worsley, the chief curator of Royal Historic Palaces, says that all royal palaces from the 17th century have an element of money which is derived from slavery, including Kensington Palace and Hampton Court. The royal family was built on a legacy of stolen land, goods, and atrocities. Queen Elizabeth II's largest diamond, the Kohinoor, was stolen from a 10-year-old prince in India along with his land in the 19th century. It was transferred to Queen Mary in 1911 and was handed down to the current queen. Both India and Pakistan have asked for the diamond's return, but it's still very much owned by the crown. In India, between the 1700s and mid-20th century, an estimated $45 trillion was stolen by the British under the vestiges of the crown. Famines which occurred as a result of Britain's non-intervention policy led to the death of more than 30 million Indians. In 1947...
Now, that was sort of like part one, then that was also a part two.
Britain wanted to get Britain out of India quickly. The decision to carve up a country led to 15 million people being displaced and between 1 and 2 million people dying. Of course, this is just India. At its peak, Britain had colonized 25% of the world's surface. From the Mau Mau massacre in Kenya to concentration camps in South Africa, Britain, under the vestiges of the crown, has a long and bloody history of colonial atrocities. And the royals have historically been at the center of them. The prestige of the Commonwealth. The Commonwealth is an organization of 52 independent member states. What it actually is a collection of former British colonies and Rwanda and Mozambique. The Commonwealth originated after World War II when much of India and Africa was becoming independent. The Commonwealth claims that it is an association of sovereign nations working towards shared goals of prosperity, democracy, and peace. But critics say that the association promotes neocolonialism through free trade agreements, which favor more developed economies. British companies own more than $1 trillion of Africa's key resources. The Queen is the head of the Commonwealth, and Charles has been appointed her successor, which allows the British monarchy to remain in a position of international privilege and go on tours of Commonwealth countries. But that's not all.
Pause the clip right there, because we run out of time. All right. So watch that. Roland has that on his YouTube channel, and I'm about to we're going to rebroadcast the episode of the African History Network show from September 11th, 2022. I've uploaded that. We're going to rebroadcast that like all week. All right, and that's on our YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP. Okay, we're going to go to the phone lines quickly here. Line one, we have PG. PG, welcome to the African History Network show. Thanks for holding. Tell us where you're calling from.
Good morning. I should say good evening. I am calling from the city of Southfield, Michigan, the great city of Southfield, Michigan. And I wanted to ask you a question. So we know that records were not kept very well for African Americans. And I think most of us are probably able to, without much difficulty, go back to our great, maybe our second great grandparent. How will it be determined who should get reparations? And do you think that a lot of our people right now are living in what you call emotional reparations in terms of the mindset?
How will it be determined where? Are you talking about in California, or are you talking about in the United States in general?
In both areas. Because you were talking about California.
Yeah, so in California, they're going to do it based upon lineage, and one of the things that they want is they want an agency in California similar to the Freedmen's Bureau to be set up to help African Americans trace their ancestry. So they would have to trace it back to a person of African descent that was in the U.S. prior to 1900, or trace it back to a person who was enslaved in California. So it'll be, they've identified about 1,500 people who were in like a semi-slavery or slavery state in California from 1850 to 1865. Because even though when California came into the Union in 1850, they came in as a free state. You did have some who violated that law. Slavery was California does not have a real history of slavery, and slavery was abolished in California, but you did have some who violated that law. Okay, so they want an agency set up that would help African Americans trace their ancestry. As far as the federal, as far as reparations at the federal level, they're gonna have to do the same thing. Records going back to prior to 1900, 1899, 1898, that's not that difficult. 1760, 1660 is a lot more difficult, but going back to like right before 1900 is not that difficult. The reason why they have to do it based upon lineage and can't do it based upon race, can't distribute reparations based upon race in the state of California, is because race-based policies in the state of California are illegal. So they want to make sure that whatever they do is legally structured. So when lawsuits are filed by Republicans and their Negro allies, that whatever reparations are distributed won't be overturned in court. Okay, so at the federal level, if people really understand how to get reparations enforced at the federal level, because it's not going to be through HR 40. I don't know why people keep trying to push that.
So am I understanding you accurately that if a person in California cannot prove that someone in their lineage came through California, or they can't prove their African ancestry, that they would not get reparations? Or is it safe to assume that anybody that's black mixed with something would get reparations?
No. The California Reparations Task Force already voted. It has to be based upon lineage. The reason why it has to be based upon lineage is because race-based policies in the state of California, based upon California
I heard that
law,
part.
But I'm explaining it. Because race-based policies in the state of California, because of existing California law, are illegal. So they have to do it based upon lineage. Otherwise, nothing is going to be distributed. They have to do it based upon lineage.
Yeah, thank you for reiterating that. So I want to ask you like a hypothetical question. So my lineage that I know is black, white, and American Indian. Would that qualify me for reparations?
Qualify you for reparations where?
As far as reparations for slavery.
Are you talking about in the state of California, or are you talking about the federal level?
No, I'm talking like here. You told me about California. You explained not race because of the policy, and it will have to be done with lineage. So if my lineage here in the state of Michigan, and if we ever get to the point where California is, I mean, realistically, not the Detroit Real Reparations Committee that they talk about on the radio, but if they get to that point,
the guidelines,
with me being
PG,
that I know is black, white.
PG, we run out of time. The guidelines in the state of Michigan have not been set yet, so we don't know. These are the guidelines for the state of California. The guidelines in the state of Michigan haven't been set yet, so we don't know. Okay, thanks for calling. Keep listening. All right. I want to go to, we get, thanks. Okay. I want to show you this article very quickly here. I mentioned it from the New York Times, and this is called "In Africa, the Queen's Death Renews a Debate About the Legacy of the British Empire." In Africa, the Queen's death renews a debate about the legacy of the British Empire. While some in Africa pay tribute to the deceased monarch, others stress Britain's violent colonial history on the continent. So when I was on Roland Martin Unfiltered, this is the article I mentioned. This is from September 9th, 2022. Okay. And it talks about, okay, so read this. I don't have time to get deep into it, but I want to give you that article, the name of that article, so you can read it. Also, there's a good one from National Public Radio, NPR.org, National Public Radio. Name of this article is "Not Everyone Mourns the Queen." Not everyone mourns the Queen. For many, FOR, for many, she can't be separated from colonial rule. September 12th, 2022. And in the article, it says, when she took the throne in 1952, Queen Elizabeth II, when she took the throne in 1952, more than a quarter of the world's population was under British imperial rule. That was more than 700 million people, including in parts of Africa, Asia, the Middle East, and the Pacific Islands. Okay. And okay, so read the rest of that article. All right, now we're gonna switch gears here, and we're coming up on the break. When we come back from the break, I want to deal with this story of members of the Proud Boys who were convicted of seditious conspiracy. They were convicted. This was Thursday, May 4th, and we talked about this when I was on Faraji Muhammad show, The Culture. Okay, this is significant because Enrique Tarrio, who is a former chairman of the Proud Boys, he was convicted, and he wasn't there in Washington, D.C. on January 6th. Okay, listen to the African History Network show on Michael M. Hotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 910 AM Superstation WFDF. Okay, the call-in number is 313-778-7600. 313-778-7600 is the call-in number if you have a question or comment. All right. I wanted to get to this other topic here, and this deals with what happened Thursday, May 4th. The Proud Boys, you had some members of the Proud Boys who were found guilty of seditious conspiracy and some other counts when it came to the January 6th insurrection. Okay, there's an article from the Washington Post. This is from May 4th, 2023, Thursday, May 4th, 2023. Proud Boys Enrique Tarrio, 3 others guilty of January 6th seditious conspiracy. Guilty of January 6th seditious conspiracy. Prosecutors alleged defendants viewed themselves as Donald Trump's army. Prosecutors alleged that defendants viewed themselves as Donald Trump's army, intent on keeping him in power through violence. Okay, this is from May 4th, 2023. Now, former Proud Boys chairman Henry Enrique Tarrio and 3 other leaders of the far-right extremist group, the Proud Boys, were found guilty Thursday of seditious conspiracy in the January 6, 2021 attack on the U.S. Capitol. A jury deliberated for 7 days in Washington, D.C. before Henry Enrique Tarrio, 46 years old, 39, and other defendants were found guilty on 31 of 46 counts. Found guilty on 31 of 46 counts. The jury returned not guilty verdicts on 5 counts, including acquitting one member, Dominique Pizzola, of seditious conspiracy, and they were deadlocked on 10 other counts. Now, the result marked the 3rd decisive victory for the Department of Justice in 3 seditious conspiracy trials held after what it called a historic act of domestic terrorism, a historic act of domestic terrorism to prevent the peaceful transfer of power from Donald Trump to Joe Biden after the 2020 presidential election. Now, okay, so we have this article here. There's also one from all the news outlets reported on this. Is one from in the New York Times that I have as well. Okay, we're going to go. We're going to the clip here in just a minute, Doug. Now I want to pull up also the legal definition of seditious conspiracy as well. Now you have a lot of legal experts who say that this can open the door for special counsel Jack Smith to go after Donald Trump because Donald Trump wasn't at the U.S. Capitol building on January 6th. He was back at the White House. We know he did nothing for 187 minutes to stop the violence. All right. So they talk about that here in the article as well. If we scroll down to the bottom of page 1, and it says legal analysts. Let me see, where is it? Legal analysts said the convictions on the historically rare and politically weighty crime of seditious conspiracy sent a necessary signal of deterrence, to anyone who might seek to repeat or draw inspiration from that day's violence. The verdict also could carry implications for the former president, for the traitor-in-chief Benedict Donald. Special counsel Jack Smith is investigating whether Donald Trump or those around him broke the law in seeking to hold on to power by fanning false and incendiary claims, just lying their behinds off, okay? By fanning false and incendiary claims that the election was stolen, pressuring state and federal officials to assist the effort and sending thousands of supporters, and that's putting it lightly, sending thousands of supporters who heard him speak at the January 6th rally to march to the U.S. Capitol. After the verdict, Attorney General Merrick Garland spoke at the Justice Department and said the jury's decision made it clear. Quote, that the Justice Department will do everything in its power to defend the American people and American democracy, end quote. Attorney General Merrick Garland noted that one of the country's largest criminal investigations ever has secured more than 600 convictions. It's actually the largest investigation the Department of Justice has ever embarked upon. There's been over 1,000 people arrested. There's been over more than 600 convictions. There's been about 516 guilty pleas. So we talked about this on Faraji Muhammad's show, The Culture, on Thursday, May 4th. Let's go to clip number 2, please, Doug.
All right, folks, I wanted to switch gears and have another conversation, which is about, as much as we talk about all of these other things, there might be some semblance of justice happening with the latest conviction coming from the latest conviction of the Proud Boys. You know what that group is. That's the group that have shown their great support for former President Donald Trump, and one of the white supremacist groups that showed up on January the 6th, and in some cases led the insurrection, that the storming of the Capitol. Well, 4 members of that group, the Proud Boys, been found guilty of seditious conspiracy by a jury in D.C. for their role to forcibly prevent the peaceful transfer of power from then President Donald Trump to Joe Biden after the 2020 election. According to the reports, folks, those 4 individuals, take a look at this. Take a look. Here are the 4 individuals that were convicted. Defendants Enrique Tarrio, who serves as the Proud Boys' longtime chairman, Ethan Nordine, Joseph Biggs, Zachary Rell, and Dominic Pizzola. They faced a range of charges, including 3 separate conspiracy charges, obstructing the electoral vote, and tampering with evidence. Now, the guilty verdict marks the 3rd time that prosecutors have secured convictions for seditious conspiracy in the Justice Department's historic prosecution of those who breached the U.S. Capitol on January 6, 2021. here to talk to us about the implications of what this all means and how will it affect things moving forward, especially given the fact that former President Donald Trump is running again for office. Does that mean that these groups like the Proud Boys will be empowered, emboldened to make sure that this happens, or that there will be more violence, or there might be some more political violence against the United States government? We will have to see. Let me bring in my brother, who is going to join us for this part of the conversation, Brother Michael Imhotep. You see him on Roland Martin Unfiltered, but you also see him and can hear him on his show, the African History Network show that he has in Detroit, as well as online. And we are always happy to have my brother joining us. Brother Michael, good afternoon. Good to talk to you again, bro. How you feeling?
Hey, Faraji, I'm all right. How are you?
I'm good. I'm good. You wanted to talk about this. What's the big part of this story? Because there have been a number of arrests relating to January the 6th. But
Close
what is
to
it about this?
Close to 1,000 arrests related to January 6th. Yeah.
Right. And I think that, and I'm bringing that up because, one, a lot of people don't believe that there was some sort of punishment. We hear that we, of course, we saw what happened, but then we don't always know, well, what's going on with that. And you're absolutely right. Close to 1,000 arrests have been made. But why did this story, why did the conviction of the Proud Boys stick out? What stuck out the most for you for this?
Well, it's taking place right now because the jury is still deliberating on 11 of the remaining counts. So this is a continuation. We know Oath Keepers were convicted of seditious conspiracy. Here you have 4 out of the 5 Proud Boys convicted. And then also you had, they were convicted on 31 of 46 counts as well. So we're continuing to see the Department of Justice go after these people, not hold press conferences every day, but really speak speak in court. You've had over close to 1,000 or more people arrested. Actually, it's more than 1,000 people arrested. You've had I can't remember how many convictions, somewhere around 500 convictions or so. You've had guilty pleas. History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. Superstation. When we come back from the break, we'll continue this, and also we'll get to the update in the California Reparations Task Force story as well. And we're going to squeeze in the Spanking story, how that's a holdover from slavery. The African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show right here on 9:10 a.m. the Superstation. Okay, we're going to go back to the clip here in just a minute. And I want to show you this information dealing with what seditious conspiracy is. Okay. This comes from Cornell University's law school. This is dealing with U.S. Code 182384. And let me zoom in on this here. This is the legal definition of seditious conspiracy. Okay, this is from Cornell Law School, Cornell University's law school. If 2 or more persons in any state or territory, if 2 or more persons in any state or territory, or in any place subject to the jurisdiction of the United States, conspire to overthrow, put down, or to destroy by force the government of the United States, or to levy war against them, or to oppose by force the authority thereof, or by force to prevent, hinder, or delay the execution of any law of the United States, or by force to seize, take, or possess any property of the United States contrary to the authority thereof, they shall each be fined under this title or imprisoned not more than 20 years or both. Okay, that's 18 USC 2384, seditious conspiracy. That's at Cornell University's law school's website. All right, so I want to go back to this clip from Faraji Muhammad Show the Culture from Thursday, May 4th. We were talking about the conviction of some of the Proud Boy members. Let's go back to this clip, Doug. So all this is taking place right now, and there is accountability that's happening. And the Proud Boys are looked at as like enforcers of Donald Trump. Okay, they're looked at it as enforcers of Trump, and they're being held accountable as well. So what people, and now it's with Enrique Tarrio, who's the former chairman of the Proud Boys. He was convicted on Seditious Conspiracy as well, and he wasn't even there on January 6th. Okay, so now, because like when you read the article from the Washington Post today, Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, 3 others guilty of January 6th seditious conspiracy. So a lot of legal analysts are thinking that this gives special counsel Jack Smith an opportunity, gives him more footing, more leeway to go after Donald Trump, who was not at the Capitol on January 6th. But the allegations are that Trump incited these insurrectionists and sent them to the U.S. Capitol. He was at the White House watching it. After the rally that they had at the White House, he was at the White House watching it and did nothing for 187 minutes. So it's always good when you see domestic terrorists held accountable, number one. And we need to pay attention to this. But also, if our vote didn't matter, why did they work so hard to try to invalidate 16.9 million African Americans' votes? Why did they were sent there to stop a constitutionally mandated bicameral, means both chambers of the legislative branch, the House and the Senate, a bicameral session of the legislative branch of the government to certify the 2020 presidential elections, to certify those electoral college votes. So if our vote didn't matter, why did they try to overthrow the government to keep Trump in office and invalidate the votes of 16.9 million African Americans? So this is why understanding history, law, and politics and economics is so important. Okay, so we need to pay close attention to this and other investigations and trials that are taking place as well.
Let me ask you this, Brother Michael, before we take our next pause. Do you think that with these convictions, with these arrests, that it really puts a dent in the white supremacist, white nationalist groups from growing, from emerging? Like I said, President Trump, he talking about he planning to run again. So these
well, he is running again. He is running.
I mean,
again.
He's running again. So these groups are still in existence. Do you think
Sure.
that all of this stuff is still is it putting a dent on that movement?
I think what it's doing is showing that if you go out here and do this, we're going to find you. We're going to keep in mind, most of them were not arrested on January 6th. They were arrested afterward. The FBI hunted them down. You're going to be brought to justice. You're going to be prosecuted. Okay, you're going to lose your job. You may lose your house. You're going to be convicted. You're going to go to prison. You're going to get felonies. They're convicting them on. So when you go and look at these various convictions, people are convicted. One of the convictions today was on theft of government property. Okay, so it's now if you go look when Trump was indicted. Okay. When Trump was indicted on charges out of Manhattan, okay, Allen Bragg, District Attorney Allen Bragg, Trump was calling for his supporters to come out and protest. All right, there weren't a whole lot of protests. It was nothing like January 6th to come out and protest and support him. Okay, so even though you have like 63%, there's a poll that just came out. 63% of Republicans think that Joe Biden wasn't. Let me see. 63% believe. 63% of Republicans polled still believe that Biden did not legitimately win the 2020 election. 63%. Well, the number one news source for Republicans is Fox News. That's the number one news source. And Republicans are less likely to get their news from a variety of news sources, where Democrats are much more likely to get their news from, NBC, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, a variety of news sources. So when you have not the huge support that people thought were going to come out and support Donald Trump when he got indicted, what's taking place with those insurrectionists being prosecuted, being sentenced to prison, getting felony convictions, okay, losing their jobs, losing their homes, reputation ruined in many cases, that's a sign to them your white supremacy is not your superpower. You thought it was, but you're going to be held accountable.
Then we're going to take a pause right there, because when we come forward, Brother Michael, I think that is going to be the gaslight that will enrage some of these groups, because of the history and the origin of what these groups originally stood for, which is not necessarily against Black people. I mean, that was a part of their ideology. But from my understanding of like white militias, they have a problem with the United States government. They have a problem with the political structure and the system that we are in. So I think this is going to be very, very interesting. Folks, we got to take a quick pause.
Pause it right there. Pause it right there, Doug. All right, thanks. Pause it right there. Okay, now let's look quickly here at this article, because we're coming up on the break now. This is the article that I mentioned when we came back from the break. This is the article that I mentioned from CNBC.com. DOJ says at least 1,000 Trump supporters arrested for January 6th Capitol riot. This is from March 6, 2023. That's what I could put my hands on right then. Okay. At least 1,000. So it's been over 1,000 people arrested. And if we go look at this quickly here at this article, at least 1,000 people so far have been arrested on charges related to the January 6, 2021 insurrection. About 518 people have pleaded guilty to federal crime so far, the DOJ said in an update marking 26 months since the riot. Okay, now it's probably closer to the 600 that Attorney General Merrick Garland said. This is from March. This is from March 6, 2023. Okay, so I cited this just to give a reference point. Around 1/3 of Capitol defendants have been charged with assaulting, resisting, or impeding police during the attack. The DOJ said about 420 defendants have already been adjudicated and sentenced for their criminal activity. Another 53 were found guilty at trials, the DOJ said. Now, this is as of March 6, 2023. Okay, when we come back from the break, we'll deal with how spanking African-American children is a holdover from slavery. Listen to the African History Network show. I'm Michael Imhotep. We'll be back in a few minutes. Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right, here's the conversation. We're going to clip number 3, Doug. Here's the conversation that I had with Faraji Muhammad on April 11th, dealing with spanking children as a holdover from slavery. Let's go to clip number 3, please. So all this is taking place right now, and there is accountability that's happening, and the Proud Boys are looked at as enforcers of Donald Trump. Okay, they're looked at it as enforcers of Trump, and they're being held accountable as well. So what people, and now it's with Enrique Tarrio, who's the former chairman of the Proud Boys. He was convicted on Seditious Conspiracy as well, and he wasn't even there on January 6th. Okay, so now, because when you read the article from the Washington Post today, Proud Boys, Enrique Tarrio, 3 others guilty of January 6th seditious conspiracy. So a lot of legal analysts are thinking that this gives special counsel Jack Smith an opportunity, gives him more footing, more leeway to go after Donald Trump, who was not at the Capitol on January 6th. But the allegations are that Trump incited these insurrectionists and sent them to the U.S. Capitol. He was at the White House watching it, after the rally that they had at the White House. He was at the White House watching it and did nothing for 187 minutes. So it's always good when you see domestic terrorists held accountable, number one. And we need to pay attention to this. But also, if our vote didn't matter, why did they work so hard to try to invalidate 16.9 million African Americans' votes? Why did they were sent there to stop a constitutionally mandated bicameral, means both chambers of the legislative branch, the House and the Senate, a bicameral session of the legislative branch of the government to certify the 2020 presidential elections, to certify those electoral college votes. So if our vote didn't matter, why did they try to overthrow the government to keep Trump in office and invalidate the votes of 16.9 million African Americans? So this is why understanding history, law, and politics and economics is so important. Okay, so we need to pay close attention to this and other investigations and trials that are taking place as well.
Let me ask you this, Brother Michael, before we take our next pause. Do you think that with these convictions, with these arrests, that it really puts a dent in the white supremacist, white nationalist groups from growing, from emerging? Like I said, President Trump, he talking about he planning to run again. So these
well, he is running again. He is running.
I mean,
again.
He's running again. So these groups are still in existence. Do you think
Sure.
that all of this stuff is still is it putting a dent on that movement?
I think what it's doing is showing that if you go out here and do this, we're going to find you. We're going to keep in mind, most of them were not arrested on January 6th. They were arrested afterward. The FBI hunted them down. You're going to be brought to justice. You're going to be prosecuted. Okay, you're going to lose your job. You may lose your house. You're going to be convicted. You're going to go to prison. You're going to get felonies. They're convicting them on. So when you go and look at these various convictions, people are convicted. One of the convictions today was on theft of government property. Okay, so it's now if you go look when Trump was indicted. Okay. When Trump was indicted on charges out of Manhattan, okay, District Attorney Alan Bragg, Trump was calling for his supporters to come out and protest. All right, there weren't a whole lot of protests. It was nothing like January 6th to come out and protest and support him. Okay, so even though you have like 63%, there's a poll that just came out. 63% of Republicans think that Joe Biden wasn't. Let me see. 63% believe. 63% of Republicans polled still believe that Biden did not legitimately win the 2020 election. 63%. Well, the number one news source for Republicans is Fox News. That's the number one news source, and Republicans are less likely to get their news from a variety of news sources, where Democrats are much more likely to get their news from, NBC, MSNBC, New York Times, Washington Post, a variety of news sources. So when you have not the huge support that people thought were going to come out and support Donald Trump when he got indicted, what's taking place with those insurrectionists being prosecuted, being sentenced to prison, getting felony convictions, okay, losing their jobs, losing their homes, reputation ruined in many cases, that's a sign to them your white supremacy is not your superpower. You thought it was, but you're going to be held accountable.
Then we're going to take a pause right there, because when we come forward, Brother Michael, I think that is going to be the gaslight that will enrage some of these groups, because of the history and the origin of what these groups originally stood for, which is not necessarily against Black people. I mean, that was a part of their ideology. But from my understanding of like white militias, they have a problem with the United States government. They have a problem with the political structure and the system that we are in. So I think this is going to be very, very interesting. Folks, we got to take a quick pause.
Welcome back to the African History Network show. All right, here's the conversation. We're going to clip number 3, Doug. Here's the conversation that I had with Faraji Muhammad on April 11th, dealing with spanking children as a holdover from slavery. Let's go to clip number 3, please.
All right, folks, welcome back to the show and our final conversation. I wanted to talk about something that we have talked about, which is part of parenting in the Black community. But more importantly, I wanted to talk about normalizing corporal punishment, how there is a growing number of voices around the punishment or the discipline strategy of spanking. And this came up among, I was reading a post by the brother Torre, who wrote for the Griot, and he wrote this piece called "Spanking is a Holdover from Slavery, So Stop Hitting Your Kids." His opinion is that spanking is perceived as a Black thing, but it's really a white European tradition that we adopted. And I wanted to have my brother Michael Imhotep, to give us some insight into this phenomenon of how we discipline children, especially using spanking. So let me bring my brother back into the discussion. Here's one of the things that Torre said in his piece when we're looking at the situation of spanking. I'm just going to pull this up here very quickly.
Mm-hmm. Right.
He shared with us, Brother Michael, this. Keena, let's put the first quote up on the screen. The General Social Survey in 2021 found that 37% of Americans support spanking, including 43% of Republicans and 30% of Democrats. Among working class people, 43% are pro-spanking, while 34% of middle class people are. And 43% of Black people support spanking, while only 36% of white people do. Now, as he's having this conversation, Brother Michael, talking about this, he's made the point that a lot of people will say this: I got spanked and I turned out fine. And we heard that from Black folks. He said, right. Well, I want our kids to turn out a lot better than fine. My bar is higher than that, but also you'll never know how much better you would be if you had not been spanked. You'll never know how much more self-esteem you would have had without that trauma in your past. Yes, I call getting beaten by someone who is far bigger, someone you love and rely on for everything, traumatic. I know it was to me.
Yeah. So Ray, generally speaking, is correct. And also in the article, Dr. Stacy Patton is quoted. The reason why so many African Americans say that they were spanked is because prior to 1910, and prior to the Great Migration, the Great Migration basically starts in 1915, 90% of African Americans lived in the South, basically as a result of slavery. So during slavery, we were beaten. We were beaten by slave owners, slave overseers, etc. Our children were beaten, and that behavior continued after slavery. Okay, so when you look at, for instance, I just posted an article here in the chat, and this is something I covered some years ago on the African History Network show. We look at this article here from July 23rd, 2014 from CNN.com. Spanking the gray matter out of our kids. Spanking the gray matter out of our kids. And it talks about how science tells, researchers say physical punishment actually alters the brain, not only in an I'm traumatized kind of way, but also in an I literally have less gray brain matter in my brain. Exposing children to harsh corporal punishment may have detrimental effects on trajectories of brain development. One 2009 study concluded. Now, there's more information that's come out since 2013, 2014, but there's studies that deal with this. ScienceDaily.com has an article from December 11th, 2013. I'll post the link here. Spanking children slows cognitive development and increases risk of criminal behavior, experts say. Okay, wow. So we have to understand that during the enslavement process, especially here in this country, African people were stripped of our normal our regular our various African cultures. We were stripped of our folklore, our mores, our cultures, spiritual systems, names, largely history, things like this. We tried to recreate these African societies on the various slave plantations. At the same time, we're dealing with horrific conditions. Okay. And unfortunately, a lot of those behaviors that were learned on the plantation, the negative behaviors, we continued afterwards. Okay. After slavery ended. So yeah, they're absolutely correct with this. Now they go, Dr. Stacy Patton, and do you want to go to screen quote 3, or you want me to?
Yeah, let's go to quote 3, brother. Yes, sir. Let's go to quote 3, Keenan. This is what from Dr. Stacy Patton, what she says about spanking. And I'm going to read that for us because it's just a little bit. She said, African Americans adopted the practice of beating children from white slave masters. Europeans brutalized their own children for thousands of years prior to crossing the Atlantic to the New World and colonizing Africa. Historians and anthropologists have found no evidence that ritualistic forms of physical discipline of children existed in pre-colonial West African societies prior to the Atlantic slave trade. West African societies held children in a much higher regard than slave societies in the Atlantic world, which placed emphasis on Black bodies as property, not as human beings. West Africans believed that children came from the afterlife, that they were gods or reincarnated ancestors. Wow.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. The ancestors, Dr. Maureen Ba'ani talks about this in the circle, let the circle be unbroken, that the children, those are the spirits of the ancestors coming back to fulfill a purpose as the spirit of ancestor reborn. One of my teachers, Professor James Small, talks about how we are God having a human experience. This is understanding African cosmology, where God having a human experience. So yeah, Dr. Stacy Patton is correct. Now, there may be corporal punishment or spanking was not something that was traditional in traditional West African societies, or basically traditional African societies, and generally speaking. Now, you may have extreme circumstances where something like that may have happened, but that was not something routine. That was not a routine form of disciplining somebody. But once again, we're coming from societies where the concept "it takes a village" is not just a title of a book by Hillary Clinton. That was a way of life for us. Okay, so you're dealing with a different whole concept of being. But yeah, she hit the nail on the head. We need to do more research on this also.
And you know what, my man Willie Frazier, one of our culture crew members, he said the Bible says, "Spare the rod, spoil the child." How is that European? Also, if you don't beat your child, the police will. The brief pain of discipline can save the long pain of European punishment. What's your take on that,
and black people are beating their children, and they're still getting beaten by police. That's not stopping the police from beating them. That's not stopping them from being killed by the police. Trayvon, you have in Cleveland, Tamir Rice. You have we can go and look at numerous examples. Just so we have examples of African Americans. Just because you were beaten by your parents or spanked by your parents, even if you needed it, that doesn't stop the police from unjustly killing you. We're making a false equivalency. We're making a false equivalency here when we do that, and that's something that's very dangerous, because then you're giving white police officers an excuse for unjustly beating African Americans, to say, "Oh, well, your parents didn't beat you, so I'm going to beat you." No, that's giving white police officers an unjust excuse to unjustly kill unarmed African Americans. And it could have been a situation where that child was disciplined by their parents. Okay, you're giving. So let me give you an example with it just happened in what state was that? With was that not Tennessee, Kentucky. Okay, yeah. In Kentucky, the 5 black police officers. Okay, did they beat the brother because he wasn't spanked by his parents?
Oh no, you talking about with the 5 black police that was in Memphis.
Yeah, in Memphis. Yeah, Memphis.
That was in Memphis.
Okay,
yeah.
Where Dr. King was assassinated. Right. Memphis, where Dr. King was assassinated.
Right.
Okay. So we're trying to give white police officers or police officers in general another excuse to justify them doing the wrong thing, justify them taking the law into their own hands. No, don't buy into that. That's nonsense. WFDF. So we'll rebroadcast this also. So check that out. Remember, right now it's correct wrong behavior. It's not over till we win. Wakanda forever. Talk to you next week. Peace. Very quickly here, we'll be here for a couple more minutes. If we look at the there's an article that I mentioned from CNN. It deals with spanking the gray matter. Where is this? Hold on, let me pull this up from CNN. This is an article from July 23rd, 2014. July 23rd, 2014, called Spanking the Gray Matter Out of Kids. Let's go to this article here. Spanking the Gray Matter Out of Kids, GRAY. And in the article, it says, let me see, is this something in the CNN article that's playing? It's one of these articles, something that's, oh, this one right here from News One. I hate these damn articles from News One. They keep having music that starts playing. That is annoying. Let me see this here. Spanking the gray matter out of our kids. And in the article, it says, how to discipline the next generation is a hotly debated topic. In the 2012 national survey, a national survey showed more than half of women and 3/4 of men in the United States believe a child sometimes needs a good hard spanking. Science tells a different story. Researchers say physical punishment actually alters the brain, not only in an, quote, I'm traumatized, end quote, kind of way, but also in a, quote, I literally have less gray matter in my brain, end quote, kind of way. Exposing children to harsh corporal punishment, HCP, may have detrimental effects on trajectories of brain development, one 2009 study concluded. Harsh corporal punishment in the study was defined as at least one spanking a month for more than 3 years, at least one spanking a month for more than 3 years, frequently done with objects such as a belt or a paddle. Researchers found children who were regularly spanked had less gray matter in certain areas of the prefrontal cortex that have been linked to depression, addiction, and other mental health disorders, the study authors say. The researchers also found, quote unquote, significant correlations between the amount of gray matter in these brain regions and the children's performance on an IQ test. Now, several other studies support these findings. A 2010 study published in Pediatrics found that frequent, which is more than twice in the previous month, spanking when a child was 3 years old was linked to an increased risk for higher levels of child aggression when the child was 5 years old. Another study from the Journal of Aggression, Maltreatment, and Trauma found that corporal punishment doled out from the mother was independently related to a decrease in cognitive ability relative to other children. Corporal punishment had the largest effect on children ages 5 to 9. Behind all this science speak is the sobering fact that corporal punishment is damaging to children. The gray matter we've been spanking out of them, the gray matter is key to the brain's ability to learn self-control. Gray matter is key to the brain's ability to learn self-control. Now, Authors of a 2011 study that appeared in the Journal of Cognitive Neuroscience said, quote, the more gray matter you have in the decision-making, thought processing part of your brain, which is the prefrontal cortex, the better your ability to evaluate rewards and consequences. The better your ability to evaluate rewards and consequences. The sad irony is that the more you physically punish your kids for their lack of self-control, the less self-control they have. The more you physically punish your kids for their lack of self-control, the less they have. They learn how to be controlled by external forces, parents, teachers, bosses, managers, etc. But when the boss isn't looking, then what? Okay, read the rest of this article here. Now, there's a study at the American Psychological Association's website, apa.org. Okay, this is, they have an article here by Dr. Stacy Patton, who was quoted by Tarrio in his piece for thegrio.com. The name of this article here, this is from April 2017, Corporal Punishment in Black Communities, Not an Intrinsic Cultural Tradition, but Racial Trauma. Not an intrinsic cultural tradition, but racial trauma. Insights into the historical roots of African parenting. This is by Dr. Stacy Patton. And it says a 2015 Pew Research survey found that Black parents, African-American parents, are more than twice as likely as white and Latino parents to use corporal punishment on a regular basis. And they are far less likely to never spank their children. And they are far less likely to never spank their children, African-American parents. But while hitting children is prevalent in African-American communities, contrary to popular belief, it is not an intrinsic cultural tradition. It is not an intrinsic cultural tradition. African-American parents have legitimate fears about the safety of their children, and the overwhelming majority believe physical discipline is necessary to keep Black children out of the streets, out of prison, or out of police officers' sight. And far too many parents argue that whooping children is a distinctly Black tradition. This belief, however heartfelt, is wrong. When we look at adverse impact, African-American children are more likely to be assaulted, seriously injured, or killed by a family member than by the police or a neighborhood watchman. African-American children are more likely to be assaulted, seriously injured, or killed by a family member than they are by a police officer or a watchman. This is a reference to punk ass George Zimmerman. Okay, that's what they mean when they say a watchman. Now, yearly statistics consistently show that African-American children are mistreated and killed at significantly higher rates than white and Latino children. Ample scientific evidence demonstrates the long-term damage resulting from physical punishment, even without marks or other serious physical injuries. Black parents who hit their children not only risk drawing the attention of Child Protective Services, who are overrepresented in communities of color, but also having their children placed in foster care, which is a pipeline to the juvenile justice system, and similar adverse paths that disproportionately impact Black youth. Indeed, African-American children stay in foster care longer and often receive adequate therapeutic and often don't receive adequate therapeutic services. Now, the goal for African American parents to protect, care, and love for Black children should not inadvertently facilitate the flow of young people through racist systems, but rather support healthy development and success later in life. Experts in child development and parenting practices affirm no solid science suggests that hitting children to any extent and regardless of race or ethnic background is beneficial for them in society. Experts in child development and parenting practices affirm no solid science suggests that hitting children to any extent and regardless of race or ethnic background is beneficial for them or society. While many Black parents hit to keep their kids from quote unquote turning out bad, it is clearly not working because Black children disproportionately suffer negative outcomes in educational achievement, juvenile arrests, and foster care placements. This type of family violence might actually be contributing to the negative outcomes that parents and caretakers were seeking to avoid. Then it gets into historical roots of corporal punishment in Black communities. Now, psychologists could lead in educating communities of color about the connection between corporal punishment and the racial disparities connected to the practice. But first, the profession can benefit from a better understanding of the historical roots of corporal punishment in African American communities. African Americans adopted the practice of beating children from white slave masters. And Dr. Stacey Patton wrote about this in 2017. Europeans brutalized their own children for thousands of years prior to crossing the Atlantic to the New World and colonizing Africa. Historians and anthropologists have found no evidence that ritualistic forms of physical discipline of children existed in pre-colonial West African societies prior to the Atlantic slave trade. West African societies held children in a much higher regard than slave societies in the Atlantic world, which placed emphasis on Black bodies as property, not as human beings. West Africans believed that children came from the afterlife, that they were gods or reincarnated ancestors who led profoundly spiritual lives and held extraordinary mystical powers that could be harnessed through ritual practice for the good of the community. In fact, it was believed that coercion and hitting a child could scare off their soul. Indigenous people of North America held similar beliefs. They're talking about Native Americans, indigenous people of North America. As colonization, slavery, and genocidal violence made life harsher for these groups, parenting practices also grew harsher. Also, don't forget the white man's Christianity was forced upon us as well. The white man's Christianity was forced upon us, and we were taught to see reality through the eyes of Europeans. Don't forget that part, okay? Whooping children is not a cultural practice that Africans brought with them to this continent. Historians estimate that about 12.5 million Africans were shipped to the New World before 1865, and about 1/4 of the captives who crossed the Atlantic were children. Defined as anyone shorter than 4 feet 4 inches, defined as anyone shorter than 4 feet 4 inches. The average age of captives was between 15 and 20 years at the beginning of the 19th century, but dropped to between 9 and 12 years when abolition of the slave trade was imminent. So if they're talking about the international slave trade, they're talking about 1807, 1808 when it was abolished. Okay, so the average age of captives was between 15 and 20 years at the beginning of the 19th century, the beginning of the 1800s, but dropped to between 9 and 12 years old when abolition of the slave trade was imminent. Okay, read the rest of this article because we're way over time here. April 2017, the association, the APA, American Psychological Association website, corporal punishment in Black communities, not an intrinsic cultural tradition, but racial trauma. This is by Dr. Stacy Patton, PhD. Check this out and watch the rest of that segment from Faraji Muhammad show. That's from April 11th. And we have that. Well, actually, I edited that segment, so we have it on our YouTube channel, Michael M. Hotep, IMHOTEP. All right. Be sure to visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, theafricanhistorynetwork.com. Please register for these online history classes that I teach. It takes a lot of work to teach these classes every weekend. And it costs us money to actually pay. We have to pay to teach these classes on the 2 digital platforms that we use, Crowdcast and Learn World. Okay, so we have the classes greatly discounted. You're not going to find this type of value other places. On Saturdays, Ancient Kemet, the Moors, and the Ma'afa, Understanding the Transatlantic Slave Trade, what they didn't teach you in school. We did a free class session Saturday, May 6, 2023. Click right here to register for the free class session. Click here to register for the full 12-week online course. And this time around, we're going to do 13, 14 weeks. We do the sessions live. All the sessions are archived and recorded. You can go back and watch them anytime. So even after the 12-week online course is over with, you still have full access. That doesn't expire. You can go watch as many times as you want to. Sundays, I teach Black resistance movements from the Haitian Revolution, U.S. Civil War, Civil Rights Movement, and Black Power Movement, 1800 to 1968. That class is on sale $40, regularly $130. Okay, fantastic value. And between the 2 classes, we reference about 180 articles. There's 7-8 books that we reference. There's close to is probably about 250 slides that we use between the 2 classes. So it's a fantastic class. We've gotten a lot of positive feedback on it. People learn so much in them. I put together both curriculums, and you can use this information with your children also. I would say the content is PG-13. It's not overly graphic or anything like that. I don't do a lot of cursing, etc. Okay. So visit our website, theafricanhistorynetwork.com, and we'll post a link here on the thread of the broadcast also. Remember, you can support the African History Network